Hello, can everyone hear me?
Morning. Hey, Shauna.
Hi. Great.
Okay, we'll take a couple minutes before we get started because I see a bunch of folks that are trickling in. Um, the other folks on video, are they a part of your team?
No, it's
No.
just me today.
Oh, okay. Um, the other attendees, if you can just drop off video, that would be great. In the meantime, before we get started, we'd love to see where everybody is dialing in from. So if you can drop in the chat where you are dialing in from, that would be great. Oh my gosh, Shauna, we have somebody from Brazil. That's awesome.
Oh, nice.
Oh my
All sorts
gosh,
of time.
Italy. This is amazing. I miss New York. It's been a while. Shauna, where are you dialing in from?
I'm in San Francisco.
Oh, okay. I'm in Fremont.
Nice.
We have some Bay Area peeps in here. All right. Shauna, I'm just going to make one more call out for who I think might be in reception because I see that there's more people in reception than in sessions. So let me just give them a reminder. All right. Well, I think we are good to get started. Um, Good morning or good afternoon, everybody. And to the attendees that mistakenly hopped into sharing audio, thank you so much for dropping off. My name is Shar Della Pena, and I head UR at Robinhood, and I'm also the executive director for URX. Really excited to welcome Shauna Hu from Figma, who's going to be talking to us all about design. Before we get started, I'd love to just do a roll call. Thanks so much for sharing where you're dialing in from. We'd also love to hear where you're attending school. So if you can drop that in the session chat, that would be great as well. Again, wanted to really welcome everybody to our weekly talent development program series. During COVID-19, we really wanted to provide students with an opportunity to gain professional development and also learn more opportunities from different employers and companies. So with that being said, I'd love to go ahead and hand it off to Shauna.
Great, thanks. Let me share my screen. Cool, so can people see my slides all right? I'm gonna assume yes, because I can't see the chat, but I can keep track of any questions after too. Hi, so I'm Shayna. I'm currently a product designer at Figma. And today I wanted to talk a bit about just like my path from studying engineering to finding product design and a couple of things I learned along the way. And so basically I think, let me change the zoom level on this. Basically, I think like we tend to hear about design and engineering as completely separate disciplines. So like you kind of hear about designers doing a bunch of work and then maybe like throwing something over a wall to engineering, and they're like completely separate. And you tend to think that you have to kind of choose between design or engineering, especially when you're considering a career. But there's actually a lot of people interested in both. And I was also interested in both when I was first starting out. And so I think it's actually much more of a spectrum where like the line between design and engineering can actually be pretty blurry. And depending on what you're interested in, there's a lot of different opportunities that you could pursue and that you could explore. So we'll be talking today a bit just about my personal journey. So we're going to kind of chart different experiences I've had, kind of like running down, like if we start at the top, I'll start with kind of my background and my education. And I'll be talking about just like some of the learnings I've had along the way. And so we'll start with kind of where I started at college, which was that I went to UC Berkeley, otherwise known as Cal, which is in the Bay Area. And I studied computer science mostly because I wasn't really sure what I wanted to do. And I had kind of figured out fairly early that I was interested in problem solving. And I felt like if I studied CS, those engineering skills could be a tool that I could use in like a variety of fields and a variety of industries. In case I figured out a bit later, maybe I want to do something a bit different. And so my engineering experience at Berkeley was actually like a little bit mixed. So you'll see in this spectrum, I'm not like completely on the right side of engineering. And it's because the curriculum there was actually pretty interdisciplinary. We had an engineering degree. We also had some design classes that focused more on like digital fabrication. And so like this was a class I took, which was about interactive seating, where we had a group project to like design a new form of seating. And we chose to explore this concept of like, how can we help students like ambiently make connections in a shared space or like a maker lab. And so we fabricated the seat, which would like connect to a mobile app. And you could kind of like indicate what types of like activities or areas you're interested in, and there would be a color associated with that. So we were exploring kind of just like, can technology help you like form connections? How can we bring technology like more into the real world? Another class I took there was called Critical Making, which was more about like the social implications of technology and how technology can like impact society. And so a final project for this class was a project where we were supposed to create a wearable device that had some sort of social implication. And so we made this scarf that would let people who wore it like tag geolocations as they walked around campus, and in particular tag like potential locations of like sexual assault or harassment. And then you could like give this scarf to someone else as this like empathy device. And when they walked around with it on, it would like literally send a chill down your spine when they reached the same locations. And so a lot of the classes there were around like critical thinking, digital fabrication. We worked with like laser cutters and 3D printers and Arduinos. And it was a good mix of like engineering, but also design and also like a real human perspective. Berkeley also had this program where students could teach classes. So you could get a faculty advisor and you could offer any class you wanted, and your peers could take it for 1 to 2 units, pass, no pass credit. And so I was like pretty interested in graphic design and typography, and we didn't have official curriculum around that. So I started my own typography class. I also taught some other classes around like Photoshop and Illustrator, and then like a UI class as well. And I actually found that it was like a great way to learn. Like teaching really helped me kind of figure out what I was really interested in. And it was a good way to set a deadline for myself to know that like if I had to explain this to other people, then I had to like learn it at least decently well myself first. And I still recommend this as one of the best things to do in school or outside of school, is like if you can find the opportunity to help someone else understand something, you'll definitely understand it better yourself. And so it's a great way to practice, and it's a great way to learn. And so I also realized that there's a lot I felt like I wasn't necessarily learning in college that I could learn much better through like actual jobs. And so I'm going to talk a lot about internship experiences I've had over the years, which I credit as much to my like college experience as providing me like a great education. And so after my second year of college, I got this job as a web development intern at LinkedIn. And I went into this job really interested in engineering, and particularly front-end engineering. I was interested in like experiences, like interactive experiences. And this was really my like first real experience with engineering in the real world outside of a class. And I really learned that engineering is a lot about thinking about like, well, how do we build blank, like this experience, and how do we build it well and build it in a way that's scalable. And the project I was on for the majority of my time there was about navigation accessibility. And so like if you go to linkedin.com and you hit the tab key, you'll actually get this like a section that comes down that's hidden at first. And it's purely there to help people who may be visually impaired or blind, and they use their keyboard to navigate websites. And it helps them like shortcut to the correct places they actually want to go instead of accessing like every single element that could be focused in a website. And so I was working on a version of this several years ago. So the new update is definitely not exactly what I worked on. But it taught me a lot about realizing that engineering at its core is trying to help the user experience, right? Like this was an experience for people for whom technology was maybe not always the first participant in mind. But it's like really important, like in particular, like it's really important because LinkedIn offers a gateway to a lot of job opportunities, and people with disabilities tend to maybe like struggle with that a little bit more. And so one of my was that we got to do research where we went to a participant's home, and she was totally blind, and she just like talked to us and walked us through how she uses technology, how she uses LinkedIn. And it was really eye-opening to just like really see, to just really be able to better empathize with an experience that I didn't experience firsthand. And so my PM on this project was actually blind as well. And so I learned a lot from him on the job. And this was like my first major like engineering thing that I was working on. And I was really happy to be placed on a team that cared a lot about user experience. And so basically, you'll see in companies that there are roles that are sometimes like segmented under user experience, and they've like named parts of their organization that, but really everyone is responsible for it. And I think like the best engineers care a lot about like the end product and how it affects people, and how you build things really does play into how that like website or how that technology is experienced. And so also at LinkedIn, I was like already a little interested in design. And so I basically asked if I could do some design work while I was there, even though it wasn't what I was officially hired in for. And so I was able to find like a mentor on my team who took a look at like a little portfolio I had at the time, And she was happy to give me some projects, and my engineering mentor was happy to allow me to do that as well, which was like really, really great of them. And so this was also like my first experience with like a real design job where I did some like icon work, like some like more like pixel pushing type work. And I also worked on like a mobile pattern library. So this was like a library of all the patterns that all the designers at LinkedIn would use to design their mobile apps. And we were designing the internal tool that would like house all these patterns. So it was basically like a design systems project. And I worked closely with the design mentor and got to like be a design intern unofficially for basically half my time there. And in the end, it really came together because I ended up actually building some of the stuff I designed as well, because I was already set up in the code base. And that was really exciting to be able to like think about not just like how to build something, but also like why we were building it and like how it should be designed and how it should be experienced, and like to do that whole journey. And so I was able to do both there, which I was really grateful for. And so I think my learning here is just like if you don't ask, you never know what'll happen. And I basically have been pretty interested about it and just kind of kept asking until my engineering mentor was like, okay, like we can find you some design work. And looking back, I think it was like a great opportunity for me to experience firsthand what these careers might be like. And from that summer, I basically learned that I was actually a bit more interested in the design side than the engineering side, which was like the opposite of what I had come into this like internship thinking. And so after that, I kind of decided like, I want to get as much design experience as I can and just like explore what this career could be a bit more. And so I basically applied at a bunch of places. I found this company called 53, which I really liked. They were a startup based in New York. I think there were about like 50 people. And they made this iPad app at the time, which let you draw and like create shapes. And it was basically like a creative tool that was very simple and expressive and very beautiful. And they also made a hardware stylus for the iPad. And this was before Apple officially released their own stylus at the time. So they're a really cool company. And I just loved how their mission was really core around interdisciplinarity. Like all their marketing pages were about like kind of connecting like the head and the heart, like design and engineering, and like coming together and like really, really blending those two worlds that we often think of as left brain, right brain, and we think of as separate. And so I decided to do something a little special, which was a special application I made. So I basically realized that I didn't really have any real design experience, but I really liked this company. And I also didn't have an iPad. So I borrowed my friend's iPad and I used their app to basically draw a bunch of things to just like introduce myself, to say how aligned with their vision I was, and to basically like come up with a bunch of like probably bad product ideas of just like, I was like, how could I help this company? I'll just come up with a bunch of ideas and who knows if they're things they're thinking about or not. And my goal is really just to demonstrate like how passionate I was. And I really wanted to intern there. And so I basically hacked together this little like flipbook website, which would kind of, their app also had like a flipbook interaction on the iPad where it appeared to be like real pages flipping. And I like made this little website. I think I gave myself a week to figure out how to make it. And then I like put some info about myself, etc. And I was like, I'll just take this chance and I'll send out this application. And I basically tweeted it at them. And very shortly after, the same day, I think like less than an hour after, I got a response. And that led to some phone calls, and it led to me getting the internship. And so that was like super, super exciting. And I ended up there for the summer after my junior year. And so this was really like, I felt like I was like taking a chance, but it's also like, I was like, what do I have to lose if I just like lose some time to put this thing together? So I'd say like, if there's any opportunity that you are really excited about and like you would love to work somewhere or work with someone or like learn something, like going the extra mile, I think, does show a lot. I think it shows, it kind of like, you're kind of like doing the work before you actually get there a bit, and showing like how dedicated you might be and how passionate you are. And I think that's really attractive, and people want to work with people like that. And so go the extra mile. And when I was there, they placed me on the prototyping design team, which I had no idea about when I applied or when I started. And it was basically a team of designers who were all very, very technical, like could get an engineering job like anywhere. And the project I worked on was to help prototype some of these like onboarding educational tips, where I basically worked on top of this like JavaScript stack that another prototyping designer built these little tips. And I built basically a bunch of different versions of them. Like I built like change the color, change the size, change when they show up, change like how reactive they were to your interaction. And we did user testing in-house with like 10 users, in which we test with a user or two, and then I go back to my computer and like change some things before the next user came in. And it was really fun for me to be in this space where I was a designer, but I was using a lot of my technical background to build things. And I was kind of trusted as like the designer who would like fine tune these interactions and really think about this onboarding experience. And I got to work and learn with some great mentors in that role as well. And so this was a really fun summer for me. And I learned a lot by being in this hybrid role, because I didn't know it existed before I got there. And basically I learned that like, okay, like I can do some design and I can do some coding, and being able to do both just lets me explore things really quickly. And that's really valuable. Like instead of having like a designer who can't code and an engineer who maybe isn't as passionate about design, and having those people work together, there's like a lot of back and forth you have to do to understand like what may be technically possible, what may be technically cheap, and like what is like the ideal experience, and what are the trade-offs with those things. And so it was really cool to see a team of people who all kind of operated in this space in between in the spectrum. And so I also decided that I would learn a lot from doing another internship that would be like pretty much focused on product design, like a traditional design internship with no coding, where you're just like exploring solutions and working with engineers. And I had the opportunity to go to Facebook, and I actually took a semester off of school to do this internship. So I took the fall of my senior year off, and I had kind of completed enough credits that I knew I'd be able to graduate on time anyways. So I did this internship at Facebook, and I worked on a product called Nearby Friends, which is part of the main app, which is like a location sharing app that lets you share kind of your like approximate location, but only if that person shares theirs with yours as well. So it's reciprocal sharing. And then there's some options to like share your more precise location if you'd like. And so this was like my first real product design job, where I was just like, you can see like mapping out a lot of user flows and options, and just kind of thinking about this experience. And like I was placed on this team, and I worked with my mentor all summer on like these location-based things. And I kind of realized that I just like wasn't as interested in location sharing as like a lot of the other people on my team. Like a lot of people had worked on location-based apps before, and they were really, really passionate about that space. And it just wasn't really something that was super motivating to me, because I just like personally, I don't really tend to turn on my location on my devices. And so this really helped me realize that I would ideally like to work on a product that I was like really, really passionate about. I also kind of realized going from a tiny startup to this big company really quickly that it was really hard to adjust to this big company, because I went from like an office with like 30 to 50 people to like this huge campus, and I only had like a week in between. And so I realized that I wanted to go somewhere smaller, and like ideally I wanted to work on something in a space that I was really excited about. And so that basically led me to the time when I was basically ready to graduate. And I basically got a job at Pinterest as a product designer as a new grad. And so this was like a new grad role they put out. And I basically got this job because in my portfolio, I talked about my onboarding work I had done at 53. And it happened that the hiring manager for the role worked on the onboarding team at Pinterest. And so the stars kind of aligned there. And I think he saw like relevant experience and felt like it would be like applicable for their team as well. So I started out on the onboarding team there. I basically learned how to design for growth and design for experimentation. And so growth design, I think, is a really interesting area of design where a lot of the like thinking, the style of thinking you do in engineering is like directly applicable. And so even though I wasn't really coding, I was thinking very like systematically and strategically in terms of like, okay, well, like what experiments can we run and what can we learn from those? And like, we would have to come up with hypotheses. So for example, this might be an experiment of like, what if we moved this topic picker, you have to do an onboarding, to the side to let you see more of the background. Like maybe the hypothesis is that seeing the content populate in the background as you select things will better entice you to complete this step. And so it was kind of like running a bunch of little science experiments. And I really enjoyed being able to kind of like use that part of my brain. And it also like helped me learn a lot about design in a very methodical way. I think like as someone who didn't go to design school, I always felt a bit like unsure about my intuition. And my mentors on this first role were very much clear that they were like, look, like you're gonna design a bunch of experiments and you're gonna run them. And when we get the results back, like you'll learn from that and that'll help you build your intuition over time. Because like intuition is learned through experience. And so that was really helpful for me to be able to validate my ideas and to like think critically about what I thought might happen. And then for us to confirm like whether or not that was true. And so I worked on growth for a while. I also like worked on the core design team a bit, which is working on things like the home feed, like how can we help you have better control over the recommendations that show up in your home feed. And so this was kind of just like a great experience in terms of like being able to see like the growth side of the company and learning how to design really experimentally, and then moving to the core side where things weren't as like based on like minute metrics, but really thinking about like an entire experience and being able to go a bit bigger. And then I got the opportunity to become a creative technologist at Pinterest. So we had a new team start up, and it was called the Applied Creative Technology team. And it was basically a team of designers who were going to be doing like a hybrid style role, like a little bit similar to what I did at 53. And so this was really exciting to me, mostly because I had been wanting to try to incorporate some of my engineering background back into my design career, or at least try it again. And so basically this team was started, and the goals were to accelerate and inspire creativity. And so for accelerating creativity, we were basically kind of this little pod of designers who could code, and we would try to help other teams move faster. And so that could mean that we were like teaching prototyping to try to help everyone become a better prototyper. And teaching was something I really enjoyed from college. We also built some like internal tools to help the design team operate more efficiently. Like we built like a Figma plugin and things like that. And so that was kind of like the first half. And the other half of our mission was to inspire creativity. And this was really about like kind of like doing concept work about like what the future of the product could be. Also working with like leadership and brand and marketing, and just kind of like making stuff, like using our skills to be able to make interactive prototypes to inspire others, or maybe like inspire the team to put something on their roadmap down the road. And so it was kind of like an agency style team. So basically like I worked on this project called AR Try On, which is now released, where you can basically try on lipstick with the Pinterest app. And I would join the project for like a sprint when they were at the beginning, and I would basically help kind of like strategize and design and conceptualize what this experience could be. And then I would deliver an interactive prototype. I was working in Swift, which I learned for this role. I didn't actually know it before. And so I delivered this interactive prototype that the team could use to go like convince leadership that they needed more resources, or to convince engineering to like invest in some technology and to budget for that on the roadmap. And that was kind of like my handoff, where I would hand off this concept and then the team would run with it and like put it in the roadmap and implement it and launch it down the line. And so I was really a partner with like the designers who were leading that effort on that team. And so this was like a cool project I got to work on that has since launched. Our team also wanted to kind of like spin up our own ideas that weren't really owned by existing teams. And so instead of being like a consultancy where we were brought in to work on something, we wanted to spin up our own ideas. And so for this one, I worked on this project about making boards more useful for people. So on Pinterest, you can like collect a bunch of pins on your board. And we worked on this project that basically introduced notes to your board. And we did this whole concept sprint on like what kind of notes there could be and where they would live and how they would interact with pins, and what use cases we felt they would be helpful for. And I prototyped something, and I worked in conjunction with a designer who's on the collaboration team. And then at the end, we basically went around and kind of like pitched this project to a bunch of teams and showed this deck and showed around this prototype. And it got picked up on a roadmap, and it launched shortly after I left the company. And so I was doing like a lot more concept work, where I would kind of like do a bunch of stuff and then I would hand it off. And so I was on this team for about a year, which was like a very hybrid role as well, where I was very technical, mostly coding and also doing some like design strategy and things like that. And I kind of realized that I really missed shipping stuff. Like I really missed being part of the end part of that process. I missed working really closely with engineering, because as like a concept prototyper, you get to work in your own little world and you don't have to be too concerned about like how the actual implementation plays out because you're not involved in that part. And so I ended up leaving Pinterest at the beginning of this year, basically. And I kind of knew that I was looking for something new, and I had kind of identified maybe like a new area in which I wanted to grow. And so this was actually like, it was definitely really bittersweet. And I think of this advice often because I think it's been true for like each time I switched teams, like at Pinterest in particular, because I switched teams a couple times. I do think it's best to leave when you're not quite ready yet, like when you still think there's stuff you can maybe learn and do in your current role, because I think it indicates that there's like a bit of fear, and if you're a little bit scared, it probably means it's something you've never really done before and you're not really sure how it'll go, and that means you'll learn a lot, and it means it's like a great opportunity to just like jump in and try something. And so I really try to think of this often, where I think it's good to be a little uncomfortable when you're making your next move. And I think a great way to figure out maybe what is the direction you should go in is to really optimize for learning, like to identify where you want to grow the most, and like why, like where you might see yourself in the future, like with those new skills that you'll grow. And so I had moved to this like creative technology team because I was interested in being a lot more technical and integrating that into my work. And through doing that, it gave me opportunities to work on these bigger projects, bigger concepts. And I realized I wanted to learn a lot more about strategy. And I also wanted to have a lot more ownership over the stuff I designed, because in a concept world, like you just kind of hand it off. And so that's kind of some things I had in mind. And so that leads me to Figma. So I currently work at Figma. Figma is a design tool. This is a tweet from my coworker. It's basically a design tool in the browser where you can collaborate multiplayer style-wise. And so that basically means that I design Figma using Figma. It is like the meta job, I guess, like designing a design tool. And so we use Figma to basically like design the experience of what this design tool should be. And then people at other companies or individuals will use Figma to design their products. And so this was like an exciting new space for me. And I'd always really loved Figma. I had actually taught Figma in college, like my last semester. And so I had kind of seen firsthand how it had impacted students, like being able to collaborate live. And so I was really excited about this opportunity. And I ended up having kind of a list of things that I was looking for, which were kind of informed by all these past experiences I had had. Like I had learned that I really wanted to work on a product that I loved in a space that I was really passionate about. And like design tools was something I had always been really interested in. I was looking for a lot of ownership in my role. And I wanted to be close to the action at the end too, right? Like I wanted to be able to work with engineering and ship stuff. And I learned that Figma has like a pretty small team. Like I think we're only like 12 designers maybe around there. And basically everyone gets to own like a pretty decent area. So it's kind of like one designer per area, and they work with their PM and their engineers. And so you kind of get to like lead an area and just like naturally have that ownership while collaborating with others as well. So that was something really enticing to me too. After doing my stint on creative tech, I realized I was like a lot more interested in kind of like delving a little deeper in strategy. I was really interested in systems design. And so a product that is a tool like this was like a great opportunity to do that as well. And the team was really talented. I was like really excited by the people I met in the interview and like just in general what I had seen about the team online. And so I thought that there were definitely people that I could learn from, which was really exciting. And the company culture in general was very collaborative. It reminded me a little bit of 53 in terms of how like, I think it is a very interdisciplinary culture. Like we have a lot of designers who like building things in their spare time or may have engineering backgrounds. We also have a lot of engineers who are really passionate about design and love making things and love doing like art and design and things like that. And so it's really, I think it's really nice getting to work with people who don't just fall into like these stereotypical buckets and actually kind of exist somewhere on the spectrum. And so for Figma, I work on design systems. And design systems are basically the first design project I ever had at LinkedIn, which is coming up with this little kit of patterns and components and styles that designers can use repeatedly at their company to make sure that your entire product looks cohesive. And so I basically work on the tooling for design systems teams. So a lot of the customers I talk to are the ones like making all these component kits at other companies. And at Figma, I work on kind of like the things that they'll interact with in the tool to help them manage those parts and manage their system. And so this is like a little example of something that we recently shipped, which is just like, this is like a pretty small change, like adding back in a list view for color styles so you can see the names of like what the colors are. And yeah, like we had heard a lot in research that people, it was really helpful for people to see the names of the colors in order to pick them. And so we built that in that option. And I think Figma, working at Figma in particular, is really exciting because Figma has kind of like this mission to make design accessible to everyone. And so we have a community, which is just at, I believe it's at figma.com/community, where basically you can like take things you make in your Figma files and you can publish them to like whoever's in the community and whoever has a Figma account. And so people make all sorts of resources just to share them for free. And this ranges from like, there's like design systems that are open source. So you can go in and see like exactly how like companies like GitHub might actually structure their design system. And people also make games like you can play Catan in Figma, you can play like cards and Uno in Figma, and it's all through these like free resources that people have designed and put on the internet. And so Figma is kind of like this amazing place where like all these different creative things are possible, which I think is really cool. And it's also like a great place for resources that would be helpful. Just like if like you're looking for a job or looking for your next move too, like there's a lot of resume and cover letter templates where you can just go and duplicate these files and fill out your own info and use it. It's a great tool to like build your portfolio in it. And it's also free. There's like a free plan. So if you're just working on something by yourself, you don't even have to pay. And then of course, for like companies and organizations, we have paid plans. And so I think it's been really exciting to see something that like I taught a long time ago in college that started out really simple, didn't have any of this community aspect, and see how it like was able to help students like learn design and make things, and how like we're kind of growing to be also this resource hub to help people get started and see how other people make things as well. And yeah, that's it from me. Thanks for listening. I don't know if Shar is here, but if there's any questions, I'm happy to take questions for like the rest of the session. And I might have missed some, so feel free to drop them in again.
Hey, Shayna, I think there was a question about, and I'm not sure if you addressed this fully, but Gina was actually asking, in your experience, which ways do you think coding helps with design?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of different ways it can help. I find that like at Figma, I don't actually code that much for my job. Like there have been projects where I do write some code, and we're like small and flexible enough that like designers actually have access to the code base and can like push code if they want. But it's not really a core responsibility of my job. And so like there's the part where like if you can code and there's some like small fixes that you just want to fix, like you have like the power to do that directly. But I think it actually helps a lot in thinking about like complex systems design. Like with a tool like Figma, there's like a lot of possibilities of like what could possibly happen in flows and what people could click on and how they can interact with things. Like it's kind of like a video game and how open-ended it is compared to most mobile apps. And a lot of times when you build things, you learn to think about all these different cases that you have to account for. Because if you don't account for them when you build them, there might be like an error or something might not happen right. And so I think like having that background of just being able to think through complex problems is really helpful. I also, like I mentioned, that I thought it was really helpful working on growth and designing for experimentation, like being able to imagine different possibilities and evaluate the trade-offs, and also like make an educated guess and run that test, and to understand how those, like how that data that comes back in relates to your original hypothesis. Like I found that to be like really in line with some of like the engineering education I had as well. Yeah.
And I know that this is to be top of mind for many of the folks here, but we have folks who are switching from CS to UX. What suggestions do you have for them?
Yeah, I mean, I think it is like a very flexible spectrum. So like in my experience, I talked about kind of different roles and where they lay there. And I think the industry, depending on the company, will have roles that kind of sit at different parts of that spectrum. And so I think it's really important to just figure out kind of like what you really enjoy, like what parts like really drive you and you really enjoy doing. And often there's an opportunity in a role where you can carve out more responsibility to do that, even if it's not baked into your job. Like I think a lot of employers really jump at having people who have kind of like hybrid skill sets, because it enables them to like do a little more, like pitch in a little more and think about things more holistically. And so it's always good to like try a couple things. Like I did that through internships. I think you can also do it through like side projects, whether they're like side projects through work or just like on your own, and just like figure out like where in that spectrum you think you might be. Like I think like me personally, from my experience, I've realized that I'm still like, I'm a bit more on the design side. And I've kind of realized that I don't really feel like I have to like code every day in order to be happy, but I like being able to like use that background in my job.
Mm-hmm. Love that. And I will say that, you know, I've worked at a number of companies who have interns and new grads on site, and a lot of our hiring teams are very open to hearing what interests and passions students have, and being able to provide those opportunities. So I would say that if you are in an internship and you are maybe doing something within engineering, but have interest in design, I would even ask like, hey, would it be okay to meet with the design team to see how things are done there, what their work looks like? I would really encourage you all to take on that opportunity. One of the other questions that we got, which is kind of on the same thread, are probably a lot of folks who are looking into their first internship opportunity. And I'm sure that a number of folks here probably, whether they are already in design or switching into design, looking into how to get your first internship opportunity within design. What tips and tricks do you have for them?
Yeah, I mean, I think people always talk about the portfolio, and I actually think you don't need a lot of projects. Like it's good to have like one or two that are like really detailed and show that you understand the whole process and like flesh things out. And I think that's fine and great compared to having like 15 that are maybe more shallow. And so I think like a lot of projects that I did in school were like, a couple were for classes, a couple were just like side projects or part of clubs, like because my college didn't have like a design major, but there were a lot of students interested in design. There were a lot of like self-started student organizations that would organize just to provide opportunities to do design work. And so like one club actually would just like partner with local startups or clubs on campus and be like, oh, if you have a need for design, like we have students who want to work on things, and maybe it's pro bono, maybe there's like a small fee that goes to help fund the club for future sessions. And that was all student run and student started. And I thought that was a great opportunity to just like get some work under your belt. And I think the other option is like, you don't necessarily have to get a design job. Like I got an engineering job and I asked to do design. And I think like traditionally, I think most people would expect that at like a company as big as LinkedIn, it wouldn't be that flexible. But I had kind of heard from a friend, and she had worked on like a similar team, and they had been flexible with her exploring design. And so she had kind of recommended that option to me. And so it's always good to ask around and see what opportunities like people in your network might know of. And also just yeah, just like ask, just keep asking, or like pick it up as a side project during your internship. Like people aren't really gonna, I don't think people will be that, people are always happy if you want to do more work, I feel like.
I agree. And then definitely plus one on leveraging your network. I love this question that just came through. What skills have you been able to develop outside the classroom that have really helped shape you know, you and your skill set in your various roles?
Yeah, outside the classroom. I feel like I learned a lot on the job. I feel like I like to learn a lot also just like on my own through hobbies as well too. So like I took like a type design class, which was like a postgraduate program like outside of college, and I took it like after work for like 8 months. And it was just something that I was interested in and wanted to learn more about. And it just meant I had like homework all the time. I had like full-time job and homework all the time. But I learned so much from just like really like understanding like how much work goes into like making typefaces. And I think that like dedication and like that detail, being like really detail oriented, those are skills that I was able to apply to kind of my day-to-day job as well. And I think like with teaching, I think teaching is technically in the classroom, but it's not really, I think what most people think of when they go to like an educational institution. I think that taught me a lot about like being really clear with identifying what I wanted to learn, mapping out a plan for how I could learn it, because I was like not only going to learn it myself, but teach others about it. And then to just do it and to just like trust that you might not be an expert, but you don't have to be an expert to teach someone. And I think I realized that I work really well with kind of like structured learning like that, where I like create my own structure in order to pick up a new skill.
I love that. We have another really great question, wanting to dig in a little bit more into you and your thoughts. They'd love to know, what are some design philosophies that you personally follow?
Design philosophies?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think like a designer's job is really, you are the advocate for like the end user. And so like when you're put into a team of working with an engineering lead and like a PM, like the PM usually is there to like advocate for the business and to, you know, make sure that there's like clear decisions, I think. And the engineering lead is there to maybe advocate for like how expensive or like timely it might take to build something and the trade-offs there. And as a designer, like you should be the user advocate and really think about like what is the best end experience. Maybe there are some trade-offs we have to make, but like being willing to make sure that it's like good still for the people who will use it. So I think that's always really important to keep in mind. I think design is like incredibly interdisciplinary, which I find really exciting. And so I do think that like as a designer, if you learn adjacent skill sets, like maybe you're coming from like a marketing background or like a business background, maybe you're coming from engineering or something else, like those will all help you to become a better designer. Like I think like it doesn't really matter if you don't have that trained, like I think people think of the traditional graphic design background, but I don't think it's still like, we definitely have people who do that, but that's not the only way to become a designer. And designers all have different strengths and skill sets. And so just like really embrace what your perspective brings you as a designer, because it'll always be useful.
I think that might actually lead into this next question. You know, we spoke a little bit about, you know, folks who are switching from a technical degree into design. What's some advice for those who are in non-technical disciplines wanting to switch into design?
Yeah, I've worked with like tons of great designers who come from non-technical disciplines as well. And I think it's really just like trying to get that experience and like whether that's through your current role or like on the side. I also have friends who have decided to like enroll in longer boot camps because they just like more structured learning. So they'll do like a 9-week or like I think maybe hers is like a 9-month program in graphic design that's after work, and just deciding that's worth the investment. But I think a lot of that comes from like kind of dipping your toes in first and maybe trying like starting with like a weekend workshop. And I think like actually one of kind of like the silver linings of everyone working from home now is that there's a lot of opportunities and workshops that used to be in person only that are now available remotely worldwide. And so you can take a class from somewhere that you would have never been in the area for to begin with. And a lot of the sessions are like now free. And so just like figuring out what you really like about those, what you like about design, like where you want to focus, and then like building up a bit of that portfolio to maybe get you your first like official design job.
Thanks so much for that. We still have a ton of questions that are rolling in, but in the interest of time, I think it'd be okay, Shayna, if folks just linked in you and maybe send you some questions. Would that be okay?
Yeah, that'd be great. And I actually have a link from Figma with some information about kind of some of our student opportunities that are coming up.
Oh, nice.
So I will share this in the chat.
Awesome. And then we'll grab that from you, because when we send the follow-up email, we'll include that in the email too. Just wanted to thank you, obviously, to Shayna, for spending an hour of your time talking to us all about your journey, your experience, providing tips and tricks and advice for all of our students. Thank you so much. Thank you for all of our attendees for joining. Just as a follow-up, you'll be sent a form after this session. We really encourage you to complete it so that we can share your info with Figma. Shayna obviously mentioned that they have a number of opportunities for you guys, so I'd love for all of you to be considered for those. Quick congrats to Gina Paniker for being this week's resume review winner. We'll be sending an email to connect you with your resume reviewer. And then as a reminder, tomorrow we have another session, Navigating the COVID-19 Job Search, with hashtag #EntryLevelBoss at 11 a.m. And then next week we have What Now? Actionable Strategies for Virtual Networking and Resume Building with Bustle Digital Group and Greylock Partners. As Shayna mentioned, networking is definitely key within your internship, outside of your internship. So you won't want to miss that session. Again, thank you to everybody for attending, and we'll see you here tomorrow. Okay, bye everybody.
Thanks. Bye.